first phase, 1.6 million a day. There's a slide here. Let me just skip to it, I guess. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Well, okay, so phase one. So this is kind of how this will go. Okay, if this is the treatment plan. The bioshells can go.
Is that our actual ponds right there?
Yes, sir. So we would take the one aerator that's kind of underneath the orange little squares and move it west, and put up a curtain across, and those bioshells would go right there in the treatment, the last treatment cell.
So what's the curtain for?
To multiple things. It's for you're going to put. We will also put these little covers, little floating covers in there, just to contain them in that area. For one thing, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, may I, Councilman? The baffle curtains act as a hydraulic wall. And it prevents the flow from short-circuiting around the treatment zone, and so it channelizes the water so that we can guarantee all the water goes through the treatment.
What do you mean a hydraulic wall?
Go forward 3 sides, I believe it is. So being that the water is equal height on both sides of the wall, it creates a barrier so the water cannot just go wherever it wants to. You have to direct the flow. Those baffle curtains allow you to direct flow without putting in earth embankments or pipes. It's a very inexpensive but effective method to guarantee that the water is going where you want it.
What is that wall actually?
Just it's like a piece of liner, basically, with float on top.
The geotextile
Just a
membrane.
HDPE sheet, more or less.
These floating covers, they're just pieces of something that floats on top
Right.
and keeps it from evaporation. That'll stop your evaporation. Won't that be detrimental to our purpose?
It's more than just evaporation. It blocks sunlight. One of the biggest hurdles that you have here in Pecos is TSS, suspended solids. Most of that comes with a lagoon with algae because sunlight and heat and nutrients allow the algae to grow. If you block out the sunlight, these block about 98% of all sunlight. You prevent that algae from growing, making it a lot easier to ensure that those limits are met.
So this solution uses your existing footprint. You do not need more land, even for future growth. WCS has offered a performance guarantee in the project. And they are agreeing to put the 552 limit in the guarantee. And they have also talked about, in addition to the 500,000 in the performance guarantee, that they could do a holdback of some money until those performance metrics are met. In other words, you wouldn't have to pay the full amount until some metrics were hit that prove that the plant was producing what it was supposed to produce, so that you can release to the river. And then the first phase would cost the city somewhere in the ballpark of $4 million. And to go all the way through phase 3, which is 4 million gallons a day, which kind of matches up with some of the growth models that were presented at the council meeting last time. You're looking at, say, $10 to $12 million total investment. And I know that to buy land, build a new plant, et cetera, we're talking upwards of $30 million. So more like 40. So I think it's just worth considering. It doesn't mean it's what you absolutely have to do. It doesn't mean that it's what you as a council decide is right. It's just, it is a little bit, it's quite a lot less capital investment. So there's the baffle curtain, there's the floating cover, which we discussed. There's a slide in here for the screen, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's the next one.
Okay. So this is their rough numbers there for phase 1 for the bioshells themselves. So it's 2.1 million. The remainder of the project is 2 to 2.5 million, depending on a few things. And this layout, we certainly have to get back to the staff and discuss it, but this layout isn't the initial. When we first started this project, the city had wanted and desired to line the storage lagoons. So this was part of that, and we were gonna place them there. They don't have to be placed there. Certainly, if the city wants to line those lagoons, it's an asset, but we don't have to deal with those to do this.
Aren't those things lined already?
The new ones are. The new ones, yes, sir. The old ones are, well, they were initially lined, but there was plans before on your last project to line them. They never were lined. You do have the liner sitting out there on site. It never was completed. So there has been a plan in the past to do that. Okay, so I cannot keep this arrow straight. Sorry. This is the disinfection and post-aeration structure that would need to be done as part of this. It just basically means as you release to the river, you're required to chlorinate it or disinfect it, and then you're required to remove the chlorine before its gravities onto the river. So that would be at the end of the treatment chain. This is an additional item that is probably worth discussing and talking about with the city. This would go at the head of the plan, and whether or not we looked at redoing the lift station there, this could be part of that, or just put in additionally. But this is this screen would pull out quite a lot of the BOD and really up the effectiveness of the plant also. So
What's a BOD? Another acronym.
It's just the strength of the wastewater, how dirty it is, I guess, is a measurement of that.
We show these biodomes first in one end of the deal, then in the other phases, you show them at the other end.
This is a phosphorus removal slide. This is kind of getting into the weeds, but just to explain, this is showing that should the city want to anticipate needing to remove phosphorus in the future, you're not required at the moment to do that. But if you decide that you want to, in other words, these could be placed in a different, another configuration to allow the last cell to be used for treating and removing phosphorus. But it's just getting into the weeds, and you don't have to. You could still put them here. You could put the phosphorus removal outside the pond. There's 100 ways to do it. So I guess the point is though that this is still compatible with removing phosphorus. So, and the last thing here is that this TCQ has talked we gave them the numbers and we talked about it, and we feel like there's a very good chance that they could lessen the limits, the requirements to allow you to go to the river. Their model that they initially used to give us a 552 limit included certain parameters. We did some site-specific investigation at the river. I don't know if you remember that, but that was done, and we resubmitted, and the big differentiator was temperature, really. And once they re-entered that stuff into their model, they looked like that they could approve basically doubling the amount of BOD that they would allow, and lessening less strict, in other words. So it would be favorable to the city.
How much did we spend on the line to the pond? 2 million for the pond, 2 million for the pipeline, $4, $5, $6 million we put in.
It was about 2.5 million for the effluent one, and then the pond, the part of it, that included the pond.
No. Didn't include the pond. And we spent millions. do something with that water. I don't think we've ever got it above ankle deep out there.
We did, and then we started selling it.
Well, I say before we start getting rid of it, let's keep selling it. They can bring money in instead of bleed money out. And is there anybody else using this biodome system anywhere near us?
There are,
in the
there are
country?
several facilities more north than Pecos, and Pecos is more favorable, would work better with the water temperatures and stuff. Even in the cold months, the water never gets anywhere close to where these are not that effective. I mean, they have some of these upward gets negative for months at a time, so these will work really well
Well, can you
here.
give us some contact information of somebody who's using them?
How many names would you like, Councilman?
I don't know. How many you got?
We've got about 1,700 units out in the nation.
How many
So, like-
facilities are using them?
I think we've got 23 different facilities right now. Without shooting from the hip.
Why don't you just give us contact information to the closest ones to us?
Love to.
Let us visit with them. See what kind of number of differences they're getting.
For the record, will you state your name?
Yes, sir. I'm Wade Stinson with WCS. I'm the vice president of the company. Happy to be here.
As I said before, I'm kind of agnostic. I mean, I just want to help the city do something that's good. And we just represented this to give you an option. And I think the main benefit of the system, or benefits, is that it is less capital cost up front, and it is fairly low maintenance long term. There's really nothing to break in the thing. It's nothing there. It doesn't move. It just, bubbles come up, and that's it. And
So its lifespan is correct?
it's a long time, yes, ma'am. And it's made out of plastic. It's not gonna, it's underwater. It's not gonna get damaged by the sun, so it'll last a long time. They use, the air hoses they use are, you know, they sink to the bottom. They're very heavy duty, so you shouldn't have hardly any trouble at all. And every so often, you can see where they're bubbling for every single one. And every so often, one there won't be any bubbles. So it's as simple as taking an air compressor on the shore, taking that particular hose loose, blowing some air through it, and hooking it back up, and it'll start running again like mad. So pretty easy maintenance.
You don't get to wait out there?
You know, there is should be no reason to have to get back out there. No.
To answer your question, Mayor, they have a 20-year lifespan on them. The only component that would be faster than that would be your blowers. Those typically have 5 to 15 years depending on usage and maintenance on them. But once again, those are on the shore, not out in the water, so they're a lot easier to access and maintain.
Is there any warranty on them?
On the blowers themselves, that come from the manufacturer of the blowers. So it depends on which manufacturer you go with.
Yeah.
The units themselves, as far as performance goes, we are one of the few companies out there that offer a full performance warranty. If we are not meeting your standards, your specs that you claim it would, we will provide extra equipment at our cost and install it at our cost for you to get you there. As Chad mentioned, we're willing to hold back some of that price up front. We recognize there's a resistance there till that performance is proven to once again make this even more economical for you. From my understanding, this is a third or a fourth of the economic expense for you to get to this limit, and it leaves room for expansion. Ultimately, our goal is to provide a sound solution for you, dollars well spent, and that's the question, as Mr. Rose pointed out. If we're going to spend money, let's spend it in the right spot and make sure it's smart money. We're happy to provide what we can to provide that insurance.
I'd also like to see some solid numbers of what this thing's potentially gonna cost.
Cost, you say,
So-
installed?
It's tough to get exactly to that place now. As far as the units, I mean, they give you, we have a firm number now. But as far as, we have some bid numbers from before. Those are old now, so, you know, the contractor obviously can't really honor that. We have to kind of rebid it. We probably have to rebid it. But in addition, I would anticipate maybe relooking at how it's laid out and making some changes. So, but I don't believe that those would be increases from what we did before. I think it would cut costs potentially. So I think that you're looking at, for phase one, which is your current flow and your current permit limit would be around 4 to 4.5 million.
And whatever that gizmo was to treat it before it goes back in the river.
Yes, sir. That's
And the
a
floating
pretty
things
pricey
on
item.
top, and the hydraulic walls, and the belt screen, and
That's all part of that number, Councilman.
whatever that number is, 4 million?
I hate to promise that, Councilman, but I do believe it would be under 4.5, yes, sir.
So are these grant funds, is this something that you can apply for more than once? Or is this a one-time shot?
So, the way I understand it, Mayor, is it's a one-time thing.
So it's
It's a
per
little bit of
project,
a unique,
not per phase or anything?
well, I think it's a unique situation for the company, for WCS. They have access to this, and it's a tax need for whatever's going on behind that money, and so they've offered that for this year for their purposes. So I don't believe it would be offered, like if we did phase 2 and 3, you know, in this, or if that was the case, then we couldn't necessarily count on that.
Anything else on the presentation of this?
Okay, thank you, I appreciate your listening, and I try not to get too in the weeds, but if you have any questions, then please ask, and I'll try to get some answers.
Thank you, Chad. Item number F8, discuss, consider acceptance or denial of Biodome grant funds. Mr. Sorensen?
Mayor and council, as Mr. Tompkins, not Mr. Wyndham, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Mentioned, they have offered us a grant of $500,000. And so I have it on the agenda so that we can let them know one way or another, because the end of the year is fast approaching, and if there's another community that could take advantage of it, we certainly don't want to hold it up if the council decides to turn it down. But if it does, the council does decide that they would like to pursue this grant, although it doesn't contractually bind us to moving forward with the biodomes, it's kind of an ethically gray area because we are keeping that money from someone else who might be able to use it, and so there is a certain moral obligation, if you would, to pursue the biodomes.
So
So no pressure.
Is that grant funds only for biodome?
Yes.
And can it be used to offset the price of the effluent line and pond, or?
No, it's specific to this project.
Uh-huh.
You don't get grant funds for something that's already done, completed.
So I just presented
Could
to
that
you.
be put towards building a new plant, or?
I just presented to you so that we don't leave them on the hook, wondering.
So phase 1, 2, and 3, what is the actual timeline for all of the 3 phases?
So, speaking to phase 1, what phase 1 accomplishes is it doesn't increase the capacity of the plant per se. I think the number was 1.6 million, which is what we're permitted. What phase 1 allows us to do is, under the current permit, send that water to the river. Phase 2 and 3 are the phases that would allow us to increase the capacity of the plant. I think for phase 1, actual construction time, putting in the biodomes isn't that long of a process, but there is a lead time to build them, deliver them on site, and as well as some of the initial bar screen and some of those other mechanical things are what would take most of the time. I believe when we bid it the last time, I want to say we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 months total construction time, and that included the lead time for the biodomes.
So overall, 9 months. all three phases.
Yes, but we would have to bid it again because we've allowed the previous bids to lapse. Fortunately, we've got the bid packet.
Mayor, just to clarify, that this phase 2 and 3 are not even necessary unless the city of Pecos does grow like anticipated, and then they would be, but those are depending on how much the flow increases over time. And so they may never be needed, but they might be needed faster than anything. So it just depends how the city grows. But the current flow, current permit, the phase 1 would take care of all that in 9 months.
So we'd really be out then at this point, 1.1.
Minus the 500,000.
Well, no, it's 1.6, so minus, no, I'm
No,
sorry.
that's MDD.
Okay.
Total cost when we bid it for everything together was around $4 million, and so it would take us down to about 3.5 million, assuming prices hold constant, which is a large unknown right now.
Good bet on that one.
May I ask a quick question to the council mayor? We understand this is a need of the city of Pecos is to get this down to the limit to be able to move forward. What is the timeline that the city needs this installed by?
Well, we happen to be in a unique situation with the TCQ. One of the things that came out of the report that we had done, we presented in the last meeting, is that we're getting really close to the 75% rule. TCQ has what's called a 75-90 rule. At 75% of your plant capacity, you're supposed to start planning for an expansion. If you're at 90% of your plant capacity, you're to be under construction for that expansion. And surprise, 75% has snuck up on us, and that's with 2/3 of the prison not being serviced right now. And so it's the prison being historically our largest customer for both water and sewer. If the county is able to secure those contracts and bring that back online, it's not impossible that we would quickly jump up to that 90% within a short period of time. My crystal ball doesn't tell me what that timeline is exactly, but in the big scheme of things, that could be 2 to 3 years we might be there.
Thank you, Ted. Just want to point out that the phase 1, phase 2, phase 1 is what you need to get you to your current limit, 100%. The phase 2, phase 3, the size of them is variable. These units, each unit removes X amount of bad stuff per unit per day. And so if you find that in 2 or 3 years, in 2 to 3 months, you need a little bit more capacity, you need a little bit more flow, you need a little bit more loading removed from that scenario, that could simply be 10 more units, that could be only 100 more units, which would greatly reduce that price. In that document, what we've done for you is guaranteed you the same price for our product from here through the 4 MGG flow rate, which is approximately almost your 50,000 population. Talk about price changes a lot. We're guaranteed a locked-in price. There's things that we can't control, the blowers, the baffles, the flood covers. That's why it's only related to just those units. But we want to be here. The investment group is what that money's come from, wants to invest in Pecos. And we see a greater picture. in
Which
Texas.
money are you talking about, the grant money?
Yes, sir. And so that's why it's tied into just this year and just solely to our product. We'll be taking that $500,000 off the top of our price as a great direct reduction. That's where that $500,000 would be inputted. That does not mean that it has to be a contract by the end of 2018. It is purely a letter of consent saying we are in favor of this. We do plan on moving forward. You can put in some variables in there. Hey, we need to check out A, B, and C. We're okay with that. We're talking to our investors just last week. They just want to see that there's interest. They want to see that there's action and that there's desire in seeing if this is the best fit for Pecos. If that helps at all. Thank you.
Is there a timeline to hold that $500,000 to say, would there be a certain time to say, you know what, you kind of,
We can propose it to them and see what they say. I'm not the owner of that funds, and so I can't say one or the other. But I'm happy to work with you and to see what we can come up with. But it sounds like Pecos may have a need within the next 6 months. I do not see a 6-month hurdle being there for that.
500,000 isn't really a grant, it's just a incentive or a reduction in price or whatever, since how y'all are doing it.
Isn't that how all grants are though, Mr. Moon?
Well, sometimes a grant comes from somewhere else, you know, if it's a federal grant, or a state grant, or something that's coming from taxpayer money and stuff, but this is coming from y'all's pocket.
Well, when they
Just to
first
reduce
proposed
the
it,
price is all you're doing.
Councilman, when they first proposed it, we were told it was a private grant. So, that's how we presented it, and it certainly wasn't intended to be, I mean, we just presented it as it was presented to us, so.
So what's been budgeted for this?
That's a good question. We actually did not budget for plant expansion because when we were going through the budgets session a couple months ago, we were waiting on the results of the report to come up with a financial plan of how to approach this. We recognized that it was going to have to be several million, depending on what the council decides to move forward with, and possibly even a bond. Since then, as I presented at the last meeting, we have been approached by a third party who would be interested in a public-private partnership where they would come in and build it, and then either do a lease back to the city, have it at the end of the contract purchase option, or they operate it for the next 30 years. And so there are other options that have been thrown out there, but a budget has not been defined because we haven't defined the project yet.
But we're gonna have to do something very soon.
We are definitely gonna have to get moving on something. Yeah, we are at that 75%.
So do you see the biodome as a better alternative or doing a different route? Good question.
Well, Mr. Honeyfield did quite a bit of research on this. He did some site visits, by the literature and by those that are using it. It's a system that works. Whether or not it's the best return on investment, I don't know. It is one of the cheaper options, as we've discussed previously. And the criteria that we've had is been, we need something that is cost effective and that allows for growth and that doesn't require a huge influx of employees to run. And so those have been the criteria that we've been holding to so far. In the engineering report that did come from KSA, their recommendation to the city was to actually go with a different technology, which is known as the SBR, sequential batch reactors. And so from their recommendation, it was not the top priority. From my recommendation, I'm a little indifferent, to be honest with you. We just need something that will work and that meets our criteria, but that does have that return on investment. 3.5 million, even with the reduction, to not increase our plant, but to allow us to reach an effluent. I'm not sure that that's the highest return on investment, especially since we are selling so much of our effluent right now and we're not needing to send it to the river. As long as we're able to continue to sell that, then it might not be a need. I think the more pressing need for the city is the ability to expand our plant for future growth, since we are at that 75%.
Does the other alternative require more employees in the biodome?
The number of employees would remain about what we have right now for all three options that we're exploring.
And which one would require the least maintenance?
That's That's a good question, and I would have to go back and look at them. All three of them are relatively low maintenance. The biodomes, as long as the compressor is working for blowing the air, you know, it's probably the least. Although it might be tied with one of the other options that was explored, which is an oxidation ditch. Basically, if you can watch sewer going around in a circle, then you see an oxidation ditch. So there's not a lot there, other than some